Hi there, my name is Molly Hollabaugh.
Hi, I'm Martha Huggins.
We are working on a tile for Zentangle Project Pack number 7. Today we're working on a gray Zendala, and we have a really fun tile for you guys.
I am going to start working directly with the pens. We're going to not use the graphite pencil for a string, and I'm going to use the darker blue PN pen.
I think it's a blue-black.
It's very blue-black. And I'm going to do this interesting shape in the middle of our tile, which is going to be the beginning of an organic star, if you will. And this shape very much resembles a ding splat, if you're familiar with that, except it has no loops.
Very ding splatty, I think.
Yeah. I have 6 points here, but anywhere between 5 and 7 points will be perfect. So I'm going to now put a point, what I imagine is sort of equal distant between one section, and create a cone. And I'm going to work my way around the Zendala, putting my point first, and then I have something to land on. Makes it a little easier. And so now you can see that we have this really fun, organic looking star. It's very festive even.
I love it. I like that it's a little wonky too.
Yeah.
Kind of just has a lot of life.
So I'm going to put my pen down and pick up the lighter blue 01 micron that we have.
It's a little like a vibrant blue.
Yeah, and I'm going to be doing some hollabah in the middle. And I like to warm up with something that's very familiar, kind of get my pen, relaxed in my hand. To change it up a little bit, I'm going to add a third band to this hollabah. Nice and close auras. But to make it even a little bit different, I grab that pen and I'm going to weight that third band. The one on the right is the one I'm weighting. I'm sort of taking my time and adding some ink, that darker blue ink, to create just a different look. We think hollabah is straight lines and there's not many variations, but this is kind of a fun way.
So you're switching back and forth to those two pens. That's kind of a cool effect. I like
Exactly. I'm grabbing that lighter blue pen now. I'm going to do my next band that I draw behind the first one. And I do 3 bands auraed together.
And this is Zentangle, so if you accidentally pick up the wrong pen, it's not really that
It's
big a
really
deal.
true. And you could use the light blue pen for that weighting, and that would be beautiful too. I just thought it would be fun to start kind of mixing the tones within the tangle itself.
Yeah, I really like the effect of that. Super pretty.
Yeah. So you can work your way through this whole center area. You can see that I've got it quite filled up now, and you'll have to decide when it's full for you. But I'm going to add this one last band.
I really love the effect of just adding that one more aura. It really totally changes the tangle altogether.
I know, isn't it kind of amazing? Just so simple, but it adds dimension to it even without the shading. It's got quite a bit of dimension. Kind of love it.
Oh, I love it too.
So we'll probably revisit this space after we fill all of our tangles in, but for now we're going to move on to one of the cones.
All right, so I am going to be working with one of my favorite tangles here, and that's jonquil. People probably have seen me use this tangle quite a few times. It's one of my go-tos. I think it adds a ton of drama to tiles, and so I tend to put it into a lot of my compositions. So I started by dividing the cone in half and then dividing those two in half so that I had sort of some even columns. And then I like to start in the middle, and that way I kind of have like I guess, an understanding of the size of things. And I start with some V shapes right in the middle there.
It's a good anchor for the whole tile. Then you don't worry about where the next parallel line needs to go.
Right. And jonquil's all about keeping your lines parallel. So you really just want to look at the line that you're working above or below and just make sure that you're parallel to it. And that really keeps everything working and gives you that illusion of things being sort of this like bent checkerboard of sorts. There's definitely different ways you can draw jonquil. You could do all one column at the same time by drawing all those lines. Right now, I'm using an approach where I do each line all the way across. So I'm really kind of going through that ceremony of creating those V shapes one after another. And that's working really well in this particular situation. I also like I said earlier, starting in the middle instead of starting at the top where you can kind of barely see what's happening. If you start in the middle, you can kind of get your understanding for the tangle, and then when the string leads you in a different direction, you can kind of fudge it in different ways. So
I think that's a smart thing to do, especially when you're dealing with an unusual shape like this triangle, is to start in the broadest area where it looks most like itself, and then it can adapt to the tighter angles.
right. And honestly, with jonquil, I always like when I'm finished with this first step of just adding the straight lines, I'm always like, oh, that looks really cool, just like that. And so I invite you all to sort of take that pause and look at it and say, well, maybe I want to leave it and not take that next step. And you can do that with any tangle. If you like the more minimal look or you want to just leave that space in the composition and not have something so inky, that's definitely an option. I am, in case I didn't say that earlier, using the lighter blue pen, and I'm going to use that to ink in these spaces right now as well. But, you know, with any of these spaces, you could choose a different pen. There's no reason why one is better than the other. It's just, you know, choosing one and seeing how that works into your composition.
Yeah, the two blue inks are so complementary that there really is no mistake that you could make in this part of the tile.
So when I start to fill in jonquil, I like to do one column at a time. And right now you can see I filled in every other band. And the trick with the next column is to really focus and start to fill in the opposite stripes. And usually you just have to pause to make sure you're filling in the right one so that they have this sort of checkered look.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes even holding it at arm's length, we love to do that in Zentangle. It gives you a minute to appreciate and see things from a little bit of a different perspective in case you didn't see it when it was up close.
And like with any tangle, if you fill in the wrong space, don't worry about it because there's always a way to create something new from it and kind of go with it.
So now I'm going to go back with the darker PN, and I'm going to work with a spiral. And I love spirals. They're so adaptive to their environments, right? We're going to squish this kind of oversized spiral right into this cone, imagining where it might go behind if it could. And we're going to kind of start now with the lighter blue pen, that more royal blue color. And if you'd like to watch me, I'm going to create some bands around this spiral. I want to leave enough space here to play with, so don't put them too close together, maybe about a pen width apart. Sometimes, you know, it's a good idea to think about working larger than you might think because it's always so much fun to fill back in those spaces left behind. So I'm worked my way around the spiral with the lighter blue pen. And then we're going to add some drama to this once we finish.
Again, sometimes these look good like when they're sort of like half filled.
And you see how I started this, putting these bands not quite at the right center because it can be a little awkward in the center. So I usually start somewhere in the middle and then I can go back and fill it into the center as best as I can. And even though on the other bands it looks like almost a square shape, you get kind of down to a funny shape in the middle, but you just sort of work with what you have. So now on either side of these bands, I'm going to create an arc, much like a crescent moon arc, if you will. But you'll see I'm going from end to end there. Just sort of a shallow crescent moon on either side. and then filling them in with that beautiful blue ink. Kind of looks like a coffee bean, doesn't
I
it?
know. I like that funny illusion of that, right?
And I will work my way around the spiral, filling in as I go.
I like doing that too. Some people like to put all of their shapes in and then go back and fill in, but I don't know if it's because I'm like eager to see what happens or I like to break up the inking in. I do like to ink in as I go. It also sort of allows you to see what's happening and you don't get confused with all the lines.
Yeah, it gives you the progress. If you have too many open lines and then you need to go back and fill in, it can be, I guess, a little bit confusing of where you're supposed to start. So I agree. I like doing it as I go.
So I guess you would call this a fragment of sorts. Oh, well, yeah, you got that done really fast.
You like how I did that?
Magical. And the difference is that she's sort of working the bar or the division line instead of the space itself. So that sort of like makes my brain think about fragments in a whole other way.
Right. You're using that as a like a trellis. Your work is working off of what's there instead of in the spaces left behind. And so, like Crescent Moon, we're going to go in and add some auras around those inked in areas. Just a gentle aurored arc, sort of defining further what we've just done.
And also like sort of a reason why you needed some space because you need that breathing room for that aura. Looks really pretty. Love that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do love how the lighter and darker blues, even just seeing that bar in the hollow bar, it's complementing it from afar, if you will.
Right.
And so on that note, I think I'll grab that darker PN blue and I'm just going to add a little, I don't know, a triangular element where there is space between these. I'm going to call them coffee beans because that's what I'm thinking about right now, apparently. Time for a coffee break. And so you can see how that just brings all of it together, kind of ties it all really nicely together.
Yeah, I love that too. I use that with a couple other different fragments, adding in that little triangular space, and it really just sort of adds sort of this little animal skin look to it, like a snake skin or
Yeah,
something.
it does have tribal or yeah, an animal skin, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess I can see
I
that.
like it.
Very pretty. You
Very
can
cool.
imagine now what we might do with it later when we add some chalk and some graphite to it.
Right? Well done, Martha. I like that.
So I'm going to add another filling to the cone directly across from my spiral, and that is working with poke leaf. And you could probably do poke root here if you wanted to. And I'm working with the darker PN pen right now. Again, I leave that up to you, whichever blue you'd like to use. But I'm going to have this poke leaf, these poke leaves start to grow from the bottom where the hollow bar is, and just organically fill the space, which poke leaf has a lot of ability to do. It can kind of morph and bend and grow where the open spaces are.
I love poke leaf. I actually used to hate it too, which is funny. When I was early on in Zentangle, I'd always just couldn't get it right. But then I figured out like sort of my style with it, and then I realized it's this fun tangle that sort of nestles into itself, and I love the way it fills space, and it has these kind of pretty heart-shaped leaves. And
Well, really, I mean, I don't do it the same way you do or how mom does it, and that's what's kind of fun about it is that each one of us has a little personality to our leaves that we draw. So you can see there's, some background spaces that are left, and so I might just go in there and, I don't know, add some fill behind these leaves. I was thinking that where this stem pierces the leaf, that I might just embellish that a little bit, maybe weight it a little bit just to have it stand out a little.
That's a cool touch. I like that. I
Yeah.
might use that.
And so, yeah, with a lighter blue pen now, I think I'll just fill in those interstices. I do love that word, because now I don't know any other word that would actually define that define that area. But it kind of makes all the leaves pop and bring them to the front. And this part takes a little bit of time, but just enjoy that detailed inking in. It's the reason why you're here, is to just enjoy the moment, not having to worry about the next line.
Ooh, I love Senna. So Senna's a challenging tangle. I feel like a lot of my students come to me in panic when I start Senna. So if you want to try this on a couple of different spaces before we go ahead, but basically I start with this sort of, curved line that's weighted into a little bit of a teardrop on one end. And I think the trick with Senna is to sort of be able to go off on your own at some point in time. But the way I started is to basically create these sort of swooping lines that begin on that sort of structure in the middle that we started with. And I started that with my dark pen and then moved on to the lighter pen. And I'm just, ever so slowly creating these auras, working my way down that sort of anchor place, turning my tile as I go, ever so slowly, just putting each one down and sort of following them until I don't. And everybody draws Senna a little bit differently, but I feel like when you sort of make that choice to sort of go off the path every once in a while, you get these kind of cool, undulating, sort of topographical map looking things.
It's almost as if it was wind. If you could draw the wind, that's what
Oh,
comes
Martha,
out,
very cool analogy. I
right?
like that. And then I'm just gonna continue to go. And once I get to the end, then I'm gonna even keep going around that line. But here I'm just kind of filling that space a little bit differently to create some more sort of folds. But every stroke starts on that middle line. So I'm always beginning on that middle line, even if I kind of go off course every once in a while.
It's really an anchor for the whole tangle, no matter what space you're filling.
Yeah, and it's really hard for you to see it when it's not on. It's hard when you're under these cameras and you all of a sudden realize, I'm not on camera.
I think
Yeah.
everybody's pretty focused on their tile right
I
now.
know, right? So you kind of start to lose sight of that middle swooping line we started with, right? But I'm continuing to follow it. And sometimes you almost do some redefine the line where I was sort of drawing over that same line a few times, and that creates a really cool effect. So I don't plan out my Senna. It sort of just happens. I start to look at like what's going on with my tile. And I still am sort of really like attached to this spacing, right? Of these lines being somewhat parallel, but then all of a sudden they'll go off in a little bit of a different direction.
I love how that one line just connected like it was part of the hollaba on the other side, just
Right?
going right through.
Oh,
I love how
yeah.
that happens.
Accident. And I'm just going to continue to fill the space using that center, that original little swooping line we put down is that's still my guide. And now I'm filling the space, to meet up with those other lines to kind of see what happens. And you get these folding and overlapping and sort of unexpected little things that occur. Oh, one more line to kind of fill that space.
I'm pretty sure that your tile doesn't look anything like that, because there's no way you could mimic what just happened. So I
Right,
think
which
that's the
is
best
good.
part. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, take your time with Senna. It's a fun one.
Off to another cone shape, and I'm going to work with floors, and you'll have to watch just for a minute, because I'm not going to do it the way that we're usually doing it. I'm going to divide this cone into columns at first with these parallel bands. Again, I'm going to put 3 bands down this cone shape. Any more than that, then you won't have enough room. And it's as if these bands were covering the floor, I guess, if you can think about it that way. So you can see part of that diamond shape that we're familiar with peeking out behind the band. And I'm going to put a series of them across the top right here.
Oh, that's a fun approach.
Well, I'm sure when you're thinking, I know floors, and this doesn't look anything like it, but when we're all done, you're going to see what we're talking about. So now I'm going to draw one directly above it, underneath the band. So the triangle is going in the other direction. It's the bottom of a diamond shape. And filling them in as I go, again, so I can sort of monitor the progress and not get confused about what's supposed to be filled in and what's not. And then I'm going to connect these. Maybe you can start to see now the floors in the background. They're sort of fading into the background. And so on the other side of the band, I'm going to put that in the empty space, if you will.
Oh, very cool.
And now you can kind of get the idea how we're going to fill it all in.
I mean, with any of these tangles, once somebody does it one way, your head starts like thinking about all the variations. I'm like, oh, what would happen if we put them matched up, or what would happen if we added this or that? So please, like, take any of these little variations that we do and sort of open up your mind of what could happen. It's super cool.
It's like you took floors and you threw it in a blender and it came out in rows, and yeah, it looks really cool.
That's what we're having for lunch. I
Floors in a
love
blender.
it. Super cool.
Yeah,
That's
it's
pretty.
really pretty.
Plus, it's so great for the composition. It kind of has a more airy, has all that open space, which I think is really nice. 'Cause sometimes you just need that visual, especially next like a Senna and stuff.
So just because I can, I'm going to add these little nestled orbs down the columns just to add another shape.
Nice touch. All right, so in this last space, and you guys might have a different number of spaces to fill. So if you've already filled yours, then maybe you're all done. But I'm going to use my version of flux here, or a version of flux. And flux is, in this case, going to be all about these sort of very like teardrop shapes. And I love to use flux as filler. So you'll often see that kind of dancing in between my tangles if I just have some space I want to add some organic shapes to. So I'm also putting in like a little spine, I guess, of sorts.
Kind of a spine, yeah.
Yeah.
I do like how you can move them and bend them, and they can be different sizes. They really can adapt to any environment.
Yeah, I think they're beautiful, and it's kind of a sort of a fun way to add almost like foliage, right?
Yeah, and I love how you have them growing from the corners instead of just all in one direction.
Right, yeah. And I have started each one a little bit in each corner and then kind of going back and forth so you get like different style of overlapping.
Yeah, very, very pretty.
And that little bit of I guess is it like a vein or a
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
vein, I think
Yeah.
so.
It kind of just adds to it too.
It can be, you can add the vein as you go. Actually, I like how you did that. Sometimes I do it at the very end, but you can see it developing much quicker if you do it that way.
And those lines I often have, if you watch how I do it, I kind of, it's almost like it's like an eyelash. You really kind of like shoot it off so it whispers out a little bit at the end.
Definitely. And you have the lighter blue pen here, but certainly either one would work for this tangle.
And I'm trying to like fit the tiniest ones into all those little spaces left over. And whatever I can't fill in, I'm going to start to ink in with my pen so I get that contrast of the leaves actually kind of popping off the page there.
Yeah, I like how you've done that because it sort of mirrors the drama of the tangle opposite it.
Yeah, perfect.
So pretty.
And it's nice to mix tangles that are a little more organic with tangles that are more structured or have like a busyness to them. They kind of soften it a bit.
Straight lines and curved lines.
Right, yeah.
It's always good to have a nice balance in your composition.
Oh, it's looking good, Martha. I love it. Oh, wait, there's more. Why not add another layer? So with the pencil this time, I am going to add another layer of these points that kind of falls in between, and this is going to add a little bit of depth to our star. I guess it's optional. If you were really happy with the way it looked, the simplicity of the other one, you could just leave it.
Absolutely.
But I think this is quite nice, and it offers a little bit of interest. And while we did a different tangle in each one of our sort of featured step points, we are going to actually just repeat the same tangle in these sort of background points. And I love the idea in compositions of marrying consistency with inconsistency. It's like it's a nice composition. Playing with a Tangle Club perk here, and I'm starting a little bit like the way Martha did with her floors, where she's kind of putting these little bands, but mine's are a lot more, what's the word we used to use? Voluptuous?
Maybe. They're curvier. They're
Curvy?
curvier.
Yeah, so it kind of hooks over that point.
And they're a little narrower than the bands I used.
Yeah, it's like an S shape, and it's a little, sometimes I like to like sort of do it a few times somewhere else to sort of get my pen stroke
It's a
right.
backward S.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Pretty
I get
sure.
things
Yeah.
backwards a lot.
And so she's not going to be filling in those bands, but she's going to be filling in the spaces in between. So maybe not too far apart or too close together. It's
Right.
nice to have. I think that looks
But
good.
by drawing that pencil string, we can kind of play with how these bands like hook around, which is kind of nice. And now I'm going to start to fill the spaces between with these orbs. And I'm really like smushing these orbs in, like almost like they don't fit. Like I was like, I got the wrong size bead and I need to like just really smush them in there. So it sort of adds like a misshapenness to them, but it creates this visual tension as they kind of like really, really just smush them in there.
So I think the key for me when I was learning perk, I didn't seem to get it right over and over again. I'd try and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And you'll see that when she starts on the left, only the first circle is a complete circle, and the rest of them borrow from the one next to it. So next time she does it, you'll see it again.
Yeah, good point, Martha.
And that's what makes this different than, say, tipple, where you're smushing full orbs together. This is really just one full orb, and the rest of them are only sort of 3/4 of an orb.
Right,
Does that
like
make
each
sense?
one's kind of stacked behind little Hollabaugh effect or whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely have that effect of sort of like the first one and then the other one's like a what is that game you play at the arcade and the balls roll down? Skee ball.
Oh, skee ball. I was going to say bowling, but that wasn't right.
But anyway, I really love the way this perk is almost like a seashell, and everybody's looks so different, and it shades up so lovely. So we are going to actually use this as our consistent tangle that sort of has this permanent, I guess, placement on the tile in each one of these sort of background stars.
It's as if the whole star behind is filled with perks,
right?
so that's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
And I really like to go back in and what my mom calls adding love and going back and filling in.
So on to something a little more exciting. I'm grabbing the white Jelly Roll 10 that we have in our project pack, and I'm going back to that hollowbah, and on the opposite side of the weighted bar, I'm going to fill in with that luscious white jelly ink, and being mindful that it's wet because it does take a few seconds to dry.
It's funny too because you think like the white isn't gonna make that much of a difference, but like wow, what a
It is
difference
a
that
wow.
makes
It
on there,
really
right?
is. It looks, I love it. I think it looks great.
Very cool. And I have to say I'm partial to the Jelly Roll 10 because I don't know, something about it that like just the ink rolls out so nice. You just kind of have to move it around.
Yeah, I think it
Very
looks
cool.
fantastic. And then these little pearls on our inventive floors here, just gonna make them sparkle. Little lacy pearls.
That's a nice touch too. Those like almost seem like they have like dimension to them, right? Because the ink sort of sits up on the paper.
Yeah, you can really play with that, and you just need the lightest of touch on that on the paper. It just flows right out.
I am really enjoying the surface of this gray paper. It's a little bit different, and you know each one of our tiles is a little different, and it seems to have like a lot of integrity at the same time. It has this softness, so it's like the I'm really enjoying the way the tools react to them. To be
Yeah,
honest,
and it's resilient too. You can really work it without doing a lot of damage to the paper.
right? So this next step I'm gonna say is maybe not for everybody, but I'm one of those people that likes to dig into some things in my tiles that might take a little bit of time, and this falls under that category. So I'm loving the way the jelly roll sits up on these gray tiles, and so I'm actually going back in and inking in each one of the pearls or orbs in my perk. And as you probably know on your tile, there's quite a few of them. So you may choose to not do this step, but if you have the time and you're zoning out and just enjoying your tangle time, I invite you to try to, do this. And one thing I would point out is that I'm actually not going all the way to the edges. I'm kind of just filling it right in the middle.
It really is worth the effort. So I've just grabbed my graphite pencil and I'm going to attack this spiral. I want to make sure that all of your jelly roll ink is dry at this point, so we don't want to end up with
Right,
smudge,
we're moving a lot
unnecessarily
quicker than
smudges.
you
Yeah,
guys probably
yeah.
are.
So with my graphite and working kind of on the side of it, so I get a nice soft graphite. I'm going around just one edge of this spiral, and certainly turning your tile as you go is highly recommended. You get a good vantage point of where you want to put that graphite. You can be really precise as you go around and round.
And it's probably important to mention now or at any time that, these videos are so great because you can pause them and go at your own pace. Obviously, Rick's handy dandy editing school skills make this tile seem a little bit faster than it really is.
And so with my tortillon that I've designated for graphite, I'm just going to gently smooth that band that I've done that sort of goes right along our
Wow,
spiral.
that's like
So
that
little,
is a
right?
quick move right there
Yeah,
because that happens quick.
yeah.
So pretty. Oh, and
And
there's
now I'm going to grab this beautiful light blue and go on the opposite edge from where I just put the graphite. And you can press pretty hard here and work it works into the paper quite nicely.
these
And
pastel pencils are so fun, and this is kind of the first time we really dig into using them. And so I really invite you guys to try all the colors they have are beautiful. This is that I think it's a blue color that we have in our project pack and really complements the pens we're using.
oh yeah, it especially picks up that lighter blue pen. It almost just blurs and defines at the same time. It's really pretty.
I love that.
And then yeah, good old white charcoal pencil just coming in for the big highlight at the end. right down the middle of this spiral and giving it that 3D effect. It's just awesome.
That's really pretty. I do feel like that white charcoal works best if it's not on top of like a ton of other pencils or, So I like to make sure I leave that space for the white charcoal to do its job. Because if you're layering it on top of a lot of the pencils, you don't get as white of an effect. So
Right, it
um,
definitely tends to get muddy a little bit.
nice work. That looks really pretty. You
Yeah,
got to add a spiral. The spiral just
yeah.
ends up being the champion here.
And so on the floors, I'm going to take a similar approach where I just add, a little graphite underneath the band and over the band. This time we'll do it on either side. So it sort of defines those original columns, those diagonal columns that we made.
Again, I was like saying, I knew that open space was gonna be nice in the composition. It looks really great there. Don't be afraid of leaving space. It really does sort of complement all the work you do with your other tangles.
Yeah, we often say this in our classes that Molly and I, when we teach together, is have have faith in this process that it's not going to have that wow factor the minute you put your pen to paper. There's many layers and many opportunities that you haven't even thought of yet that will be presented as you go. So leaving room for those opportunities and surprises, is part of the magic here.
Yeah, that looks super good. Love that.
So I'm just smoothing that graphite gently and don't have to go too crazy when you're on top of the blue ink. But
Right. This tile particularly is a time investment and has a ton of layers. And so Martha was right in saying how much you need to sort of just trust that process.
so that one area where we didn't put any graphite is just screaming for some white highlights. And so just adding just a stripe of white charcoal here.
Right? So pretty.
I love the dimensions that the light and dark can add.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like the white charcoal pencil is like one of the best things that's ever happened
It's
to my,
pretty
my
great.
Zentangle life.
And we've given you a tortillon to use if you want to work it into the paper, but you don't really need it. It kind of stands on its own.
Yeah, sometimes I kind of like buff it in with the pencil itself. So I'm adding some graphite here, and I'm really sort of reworking that original line that I put down. And then I'm gonna put some emphasis on the edge that sort of is in the center, and then maybe a little bit towards the point. And I am very heavy-handed with my graphite. I like a lot of drama. I'm careful not to cover the whole space, but I like the sort of intenseness of having that dark, sort of almost blackness going and fading into a lighter gray color. So,
I think that comes with experience. As a new tangler myself, I was timid with my graphite, but as I got a little bit more courageous, I would just start really putting it down, and it's so complimentary. It's so worth it.
so I'm going over some of that graphite with the blue just for some interest. It's kind of like a curious color there. It's almost like, is there blue in there?
Yeah.
And it kind of glistens.
Blues to grays. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's really subtle and quite beautiful. And I am gonna going back with the tortillon that's not sure which color to use, and it's hard to keep them all keep track of them all. And then I'm gonna go back with my white pencil and sort of choose some places to like some curves maybe or some spaces um, that are left white to kind of add some highlights. There's no real like rhyme or reason to what is the parts that should be left unshaded, but if you have sort of a gradual process, you'll get some spaces that sort of invite it.
There's so much going on in this tile, but having those highlighted areas, gives your eye a place to go focus on when you first land on this incredible piece of art. Looks really great.
Very cool. That's a fun tangle. Oh, and then a little more graphite. Like always, going back and forth and seeing where you need, what as you work each tangle.
We know this tile is taking quite a bit of time, and so it might not be a bad thing if you take a break and then you come back with fresh eyes and see
Right?
all the different opportunities you have for adding light and dark.
So I'm working my jonquil here now, and what's fun about jonquil, and you can shade it so many different ways, creating different optical illusions. Right now, I'm just choosing to begin by sort of adding darkness around the edges. And now I'm kind of looking at each column, and I'm sort of choosing just the left side of each one of those columns.
Or the right?
Is that
It's the right side of the line.
it's the left side of the space.
Yes, I see it.
Yeah. Whatever you. And then I'm just sort of gradually kind of buffing it out with my tortillon to sort of fade the graphite,
Already adding another dimension to it.
right? It's like a little whimsy with this tangle, right? And then just going over and first filling in all of the stripes just to sort of pull them away from the oh, background. Got a little charcoal on that with my finger, but you know what? I bet I can just go over it with my pencil later. And just by adding that charcoal in each space, it really does pull it out from the back, the gray in the back, which is nice.
Very pretty.
And now I'm kind of going over it in a different direction, which seems like sort of counterproductive, but it adds a different effect, right? So I used the white charcoal pencil 2 different ways on the same tangle.
It's shimmering.
Yeah. And this time I am going to just invite it into that blue pen because it was sitting on there a little bit. So just to sort of make sure those charcoal bits are into the grains of the paper. I love jonquil. It's
So
awesome. Like every
pretty.
time, every time. So great. Makes me happy.
Yeah. In the blue, my goodness, it's so
Right?
cool.
All right. So now onto the flux, and flux just needs like a little depth, sort of where the bottoms of the like sort of leaves, I guess, come together. So I'm just going to add some real dark graphite right where they sort of seem to find the stem. Go there all the way around and just sort of gently inviting the graphite into each leaf and softly seeing how fades into no shading at all. And then going back with the charcoal pencil and just adding a little highlight at the top. Again, just to sort of give each leaf a little bit of its own presence.
So
Love
pretty.
that. Yeah, it's pretty. And it really does change the way it looks just by adding that charcoal. And I'm just kind of adding a little shadow on the outside here just to kind of define that cone shape.
Gorgeous. So with my poke leaf, again, number of ways that you could approach it, and I think I'm just going to treat this as a full-on, like a textural tangle. So, imagining that this cone is just kind of floating on its own, and I'm highlighting the edges on purpose. So I'm going around the edges with my graphite and gently working it into the paper.
It's actually a good approach, Martha, because sometimes I get caught up in trying to shade every leaf with poke leaf, and that
Right.
can get a little bit busy in a small space like this. So I love the idea of just sort of working the whole thing as like a
Yeah, exactly.
whole there.
So it's like this cone is folding down, and then we'll bring the center to the foreground with some little charcoal
Pretty,
pencil.
kind of magical, mystical.
And you can be pretty heavy-handed with the white charcoal because eventually some of it does sort of slough off,
Yeah.
as you handle the tile, as you, work it. And, always feel free to go back again with whatever element you're using to highlight your tangles, in case you want more dark, more light.
Well, I do like how that you were pretty dark with the graphite there, and it really like kind of has its own presence against the other spires on the star. So, or is that a spire? What do you call it?
Yes,
Something
I
like
don't
that.
know. I'm calling it a cone.
I sometimes make up words. Um,
So here on Halaba, taking a, a fairly traditional approach to shading it, and I'm adding some graphite where the bands come together, and anytime one goes under another, I'm just adding a little bit to give it that further look of falling behind whatever's on the top. You have that first band that's on the top, and now you can really tell that it's above the others. And then I'm going to add some graphite around the edges of our original shape that we started this whole process with, this sort of ding splat shape. It's so fun.
I love it.
And this gray paper, I know we've said it earlier, but I do really love how it accepts the graphite and accepts the white charcoal. Just,
And accepts a lot of layers because
yeah.
we're putting down a lot of layers here. So another cool effect I've been playing with lately is putting graphite over the jelly roll. It's kind of this funny approach, and it sort of sits on top of it, and then once you use the tortillon, it almost like gets this burnished, shiny look to it. And to me, it almost looks like I got like an applique and put it on top of my tile. And I think it's kind of interesting and fun. And so I've been playing with it a lot lately. And I'm going to do that with this perk here, is just putting graphite on the edges and then going back in with my tortillon. And you will notice how different it is putting the graphite down on top of the gel pen. It's like you're not really working on paper anymore. You're working on top of this gel ink. So very different approach. And I'm playing with like just adding a little of that blue too. It's kind of subtle, but it sort of just makes it look like an icy
It
white.
does looks like something icy. So this final step here is to just go back with the darker blue, and this is an optional step, of course, and just define that original line. Just really make it purposeful. Make it,
What a change that does, though, just like going back and doing it again. We've added so much ink and pencil to this tile that just by our hands sort of rubbing over it, you lose that intensity. And I love this kind of step of going back and adding love to your lines.
it's kind of a cool full circle of ending where you started.
Right, and it's a nice ceremony too, where you're kind of, putting in those finishing touches and sculpting your lines and sort of maybe reflecting a little bit on the process, bringing back some of those first strokes you put down.
Yeah, I think it's can be very powerful, as you said, to redraw a line that you drew at another time. You're drawing on your lines here, and how do they feel different? This time from the last. You can see I'm just kind of adding a little bit of a rounding where these corners come together, just softening it a little bit, giving it a little bit of character.
Kind of some shadow, right? Like almost like it's into the corners here.
And you can also, it's a great way to, revisiting an old line is a way to maybe, I don't want to say perfect, but make it better than you originally drew it.
Sculpt it, right?
Sculpt it,
You're
yeah.
sort of like playing with it a little bit, forming it. I do it constantly. If you watch me draw, I'm like always going back and sort of redrawing and reworking it.
And I'm going to maybe just on a few of these corners on the hollabah, just sort of seemed to be the right thing to do. It's almost as if I didn't do any dusting in my house for a while, and there's things starting to collect in the corners. but in this case, I think it's a positive thing.
I'm going to say that now when I go home to my husband.
Just
It
some
adds, it
rounding.
adds character. It's really just adds character to the corners
It's
of the room.
not dust. It's just a little rounding in the corners of the living room floor.
Right. That might be the best thing we said all day.
Well,
That's pretty awesome, Martha. Well, I think we're a pretty good team, and I hope you enjoyed working on this tile with us. And
we certainly had a good time.
we did. Here's another one we did, and just so you can see, just
Our demo tile.
a little bit different. And we've worked this same idea with a couple of different classes on some Renaissance tiles. And once you have this sort of string down, you can put so many different things in there. So
It's actually a really fun trick.
yeah, I hope you guys explore it some, and we can't wait to see what you do. So share it with us on the Mosaic app, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.